Sometimes the most serious warnings our bodies give us are also the most, well, mysterious. Today, we're going to unravel a fascinating medical clue, one that shows up right on the skin, but is actually telling a story about something going on way, way deeper inside. Let's dive in.
So take a look at this. At first glance, you might just think, wow, that's a really nasty bruise around the belly button. But here's the thing. This isn't from bumping into a table. No, this is a very specific, well-known sign, and it's a critical warning that something has gone wrong inside the abdomen. So what on earth could be causing it?
Well, this visual clue actually has a name. It's called Cullen sign. And to really get why it's so important, we have to figure out exactly what it is we're looking at. Okay, so in any good mystery, the first thing you have to do is define the evidence, right? So let's get a closer look at this strange bruise and figure out what makes it such a specific medical clue. Officially, Cullen sign is defined as swelling and bruising. You might hear doctors call it ecchymosis, that shows up in the fatty tissue right around the navel. That area is called the periumbilical area, and the color can be anything from a kind of yellowish gray all the way to a deep, dark purple. It really just depends on how long the blood has been collecting there.
Now here's what's really telling. This isn't a bruise that pops up instantly. It can actually take a full 2 or even 3 days to appear. And that delay is a huge hint that the source of the problem isn't on the surface at all. It's coming from somewhere deep inside the body.
All right, so we've defined our clue. Now it's time to identify our prime suspect. And in the vast majority of these cases, the trail leads us straight to one small but incredibly important organ, the pancreas. The number one cause, the big one, is a condition called acute hemorrhagic pancreatitis. I know, that's a mouthful, right? So let's break it down. Acute pancreatitis just means the pancreas suddenly gets really, really inflamed. But that word hemorrhagic, that's the key. It means the inflammation has gotten so bad that the pancreas itself has actually started to bleed. So how common is this? Well, it's actually incredibly rare. Out of all the people who get acute pancreatitis, only about 1 to 3% will ever show Cullen sign. And that rarity is exactly what makes it so important. Think about it. In a world full of high-tech CT scans and MRIs, this is a vital clue a doctor can spot with their own eyes, right at the bedside. It can signal a life-threatening emergency long before any machine confirms it. And what's really interesting is that Cullen sign often doesn't show up alone. It kind of has a partner in crime, if you will, called Gray-Turner's sign. So while Cullen sign is at the front, around the belly button, Gray-Turner's shows up as bruising along the flanks, the sides of your abdomen. They're two different clues, but they often point to the very same internal emergency. Okay, so we've got the clue and we've got our prime suspect. But how does bleeding deep inside your abdomen create such a specific bruise on the surface of your skin? Well, the answer is all about following the trail through our body's internal pathways. The journey this internal bleeding takes is pretty fascinating. First, it all starts way in the back of the abdomen, in a space called the retroperitoneum. Then, this blood doesn't just sit there. It slowly seeps forward, following these natural pathways and membranes inside our body. It's almost like water slowly finding the easiest path through soil. And finally, that fluid makes its way all the way to the front of the body, where it pools in the fatty tissue around the belly button, basically staining the skin from the inside out. And boom, that's Cullen sign. Now, while the pancreas is definitely the prime suspect, it's not always the culprit. A good detective has to consider every possibility, and Cullen sign can actually point to a whole lineup of other very serious emergencies. And this list is no joke. We're talking about things like a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, a ruptured spleen, or even a tear in the body's biggest artery, the abdominal aorta. The one thing that connects all of these? Major internal bleeding. And that's exactly why, no matter what the cause turns out to be, the second a doctor sees Cullen sign, it is an immediate, major red flag. And finally, every great clue has an origin story, and the history behind Cullen sign has this one fantastic little twist that I think might surprise you. So, the story starts way back in 1918 with a Canadian physician, Dr. Thomas S. Cullen. He was the first person to ever document this strange sign. Now, more than 100 years later, it's still recognized as a critical, even if rare, finding that immediately signals a potential emergency. But here's the twist. Dr. Cullen wasn't a specialist in pancreatitis or internal medicine.
He was a gynecologist, and he first described this sign not in a patient with a bleeding pancreas, but in a patient who had a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. So the very first case ever written about, the one that gave this sign its name, was actually a gynecological emergency, not the pancreatic one it's most famous for today. Pretty cool, huh?
When you really think about it, Cullen's sign is just a powerful reminder of how our bodies communicate with us. It shows that something that looks like just a simple bruise on the surface can actually be this incredibly complex message from deep inside, telling a story of an urgent hidden crisis. It really makes you wonder, what other signals are our bodies trying to send us every single day?